chapter 20. We're picking up with section 20.5, which is discussing the organelles that are inside of our cell that have membranes around them. So the most obvious one is the cell membrane, cell plasma membrane. It's going to be this outer wall right here. This is a plant cell, so it's the tan structure that goes around. The metabolic activities include taking up and releasing molecules in the ways we just talked about, sensing stimuli so that they can respond, and then attaching to other cells and objects based on their purpose and function. The nuclear membrane is what's going to separate the nucleoplasm, which is the fluid inside the nucleus, from the cytoplasm, which is the fluid outside the nucleus. And it's also going to surround the DNA and protect the DNA. The endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, is a set of folded membranes that provides a large surface area where chemical reactions occur. So this is important for cellular processes, and it's the purpose of the endoplasmic reticulum. You can see here in blue around the nuclear membrane, they have speckles on them, and those are where ribosomes are located, which you may have learned are going to be places where reactions occur. The Golgi apparatus are the ones there in pink. They are flattened, smooth, membranous sacs. They resemble stacked pancakes, and this is where synthesis, packaging, and release of certain molecule occurs within the cell. The last membranous structure we're going to talk about is a lysosome. Hydrolytic enzymes that are converted from inactive to active are going to be packaged in this sac, and then the vessels will be pinched off to form lysosomes. So this is kind of like your mailman. They pick up the goods, which are in this case are active enzymes your body needs for processes, and then they're going to get ready to carry them to the place where they are going to be used. So two other really important organelles, which actually you might be familiar with, are the mitochondria and the chloroplast. So the mitochondria are protein and enzymes that are involved in aerobic cellular respiration, located on the inner surfaces called cristae. So if we look inside, it kind of looks like a jelly bean over here on the right-hand side, and each of those little folds is called the cristae. And when you learned about mitochondria, you probably learned that they are the powerhouse of the cell, which, believe it or not, is a biologist's least favorite thing to call a mitochondria. But it is where an important process occurs. It's called aerobic cellular respiration. So anytime you read the word aerobic, it's going to be oxygen involving. So reactions in oxygen involved in the release of energy from food molecules. So when you eat and your body gets energy from that, it's being processed there in the mitochondria, in those cristae. The chloroplasts, on the other hand, are only found in plants and algae, things that are green, so we don't have them. Here in the chloroplast, light is going to be converted to chemical bond energy through photosynthesis in these stroma. So you can see this also looks like a green jelly bean, and to me those look like pancakes stacked up. And so in plants, this is kind of like where the powerhouse of the plant cell is. It's where all the sunlight's going to be absorbed and then used for important processes. Now, the cell is also made up of structures, organelles that are not contained in a membrane, non-membranous organelles. Ribosomes are going to be one we'll talk about. These are composed of RNA, which is a type of protein that's important for, nucleic acid, which is important in our transmission of information. So your DNA becomes RNA, which becomes proteins, and so RNA and proteins are both important for the functionality of your body. And then it says ribosomes are going to function in protein manufacturing. Microtubules, microfilaments, and intermediate filaments are going to be elongated protein structures that interconnect with each other to form various structures. So they're kind of like the backbone or the building blocks, rebarb type things for the cell. The cytoskeleton provides cell with shape, support, and mobility. And then the centrioles are organized microtubules into spindle fibers used for attachments of chromosomes during cell division. And then there's also going to be cilia or flagella, which are used for cell movement. These kind of look like little arms, or the flagella will look like a tail, and it's how they navigate around, but it's not a membranous type structure. So these are your non-membranous type structures, meaning they don't have that membrane we talked about, whereas the other ones on the last two slides do. So here's an example of those filaments and the microtubules. You can see they run throughout the cell, and they kind of act like the structural support to allow the cell to have space. And so they're more structurally utilized and not so much through respiration or photosynthesis like some of the other structures we talked about. So inside the nucleus, we've talked about everything outside the nucleus, but inside the nucleus, we're going to start with the nuclear membrane, which is going to separate the inner part of the nucleus from outside the nucleus. There are nuclear pores, which allow molecules to pass in and out, but because the nucleus is within a cell that's surrounded by a membrane, it's kind of like keeping, if you go to a bank has a bunch of safe things, but that the money is kept within an actual safe. They don't keep the money out right there in the lobby, so it helps to keep the money safe because it's in a secondary structure. Because the DNA is held within a safe and the cell is like the bank building, the DNA is safeguarded from a lot of things that might happen to it because it's set up that way. So the nucleolus is that, on the right hand side, it's the thing in blue. It's used in the manufacture of ribosomes. Chromatin looks like a big red spaghetti noodle there inside the cell, and this is the long, loosely organized DNA and protein strands. And the chromosomes are the tightly coiled chromatid, same molecule as chromatin, but arranged different structurally. So chromosomes will become important when we start talking about reproduction. You probably know you have 23 chromosomes from mom, 23 chromosomes from dad, giving you 46 chromosomes. So we're going to stop here and talk about glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and respiration and photosynthesis and the cell cycle on the next set of videos.